practice gives you something, like a recipe gives you something, you know? And as you lean into more and more of those things, you create these awarenesses. So in the beginning, I don't feel like there was that through line, because I was really trying to be immersed in or to create understanding into what I believed yoga to be for me at that time. But now I think with all of this different information out there, and I don't know if you want to call it like the experimental fitness, if you will, or experimental movement industry is so much broader than it was back then.
The
like,
access to options.
This access to options
so
and
much
information is so much bigger, which I think is wonderful, no matter what you prefer, because it gives you an understanding that like you can't do everything, but you can do something. And hopefully that something is what you need. Like, it's very similar, I guess, to my very limited and only as a fan experience of watching MMA, right? So, like, when I first started watching MMA, UFC mainly, obviously, it was just exciting to me. So it was one of the thing that I think is so interesting about MMA is that your whole life is building up to this very particular moment on this very particular day, 4 times a year if you're new, 3 times a year if you're coming up, 2 times a year if you're really good, and like 1 time a year if you're like the champion.
Yes.
Like your whole life is building up to this hyper particular moment in time. Like, hey, you have to be your best
right now.
Yeah, on Saturday, May 20th. I don't even know if that's a Saturday. At 10:03 p.m. And you have to be really good from 10:03 p.m. to 10:48 p.m. And if you're great during this hyper-specific period of time,
your whole life could change.
Your whole life changes. Like your whole life changes. And that's so wild to me, because it's the reverse of really what we teach and share in so many different ways, which is be mindful. There's value in all moments.
Every moment is equally as valuable as the next. Every pose equally as valuable. Yeah.
Totally. And so that's like the thing that fascinated me so much about MMA is like literally you're in this such a specific moment, and like you could have done all the preparation for the world in this moment, and if you flopped in that one particular period of time, we're in March Madness right now too, and so you're kind of seeing that if you watch sports at all. Yeah, if you watch sports at all, it's like, oh my goodness, like American college basketball, for those of you that are from abroad or just don't care. Like you could have had this phenomenal season or this phenomenal career if you're like a senior. And some of these dudes are like 5th-year seniors because of the COVID season or whatever. And so it's like, man, like you've worked from like probably 8 to 23 for like this moment, especially if like you're a small school player.
Yeah.
And like this is the moment where like you get to do it. And if you just don't do it, it's just like, oh.
All that.
Yes. All that.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
It's a super high pressure thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, especially as an adult, when you get out of different than MMA. I know it's adults fighting in MMA, but there's something when you get out of the competitive arena for whatever it is you did, whether it's group sports as a kid or the college basketball, any of that, when you're in this just like open world of being an adult who enjoys movement, enjoys fitness, does things extracurricularly, it can be this interesting experience of like, oh, I have to self-motivate and care every day. Yeah. Every time I get on the mat, I have to craft a mobility practice, a yoga practice, a ritual that is like long-term works for me, feels better because there's not that end game. There's not that like I'm working towards this day and then after that I get a break, I get a whatever. It's like you got to find a way to incorporate into your life, make your routine that you want to keep doing, that works, because otherwise like there's no one telling you have to.
Exactly.
There's no moment of culmination where it's like, I hope you did your mobility because today's the day. Like, it's going to show. It's like, it's just up to you. And that's why I think it's so interesting to think about, well, okay, how does it show up in your life? And if it needs to change or evolve, but how will you make it a part of your life? Because no one's checking on you.
No.
You know what I mean? There is no high pressure moment.
And it only matters as much as it matters to you. And you build that in over time and over time. And it's all layered and detailed in different ways, and there's so many different multifaceted disciplines and ways to approach it, right?
Yep.
So again, when we first started watching MMA, like I only really was like, oh, like there's striking and then there's ground fighting, and ground fighting looks slow.
You're like, that's boring. Stand them up.
Yeah. Right? And then I was like, oh, this guy's really good at striking. and he's about to fight a wrestler. Well, he can just go practice wrestling for a few weeks and then he'll be ready. And it's like no, fam, that's actually not
The insult.
Yeah, that's actually not. I was like, oh, he's been training his BJJ. Okay, then
He'll be fine against
yeah,
this person that's been doing it their whole life.
Yeah, it's like no, that's not how it works, you know. But again, all of these different movement modalities, all these different yoga practice modalities, all these different mobility modalities have a unique focus, preference, particularity to them that creates such a dynamic experience and an understanding that like you have to pick and choose. Like you can't be phenomenal everywhere. It's not possible. Because we're all constricted by time and energy, right? Like how much time do you have? Maybe a lot, maybe a little. How much energy do you have? Maybe a lot, maybe a little. But no matter who you are, we're all constricted by those two factors in some capacity. And so you can only incrementally create progress by letting go of one thing you want to do to bring more focus, awareness, and attention to another. And again, if you want to be as general as possible, then everything will just generally get better over a long period of time. You have to kind of look at things in that type of light.
Yeah, you have to kind of understand what you're crafting within the capacity that you have space for in your life, you know?